Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I would argue that if you've used the world of big technology on the internet today, then you've probably interacted with today's guest's work, because the more I researched him, just seems like he has been involved in so many big projects across the world of tech. And what's really cool is he's also one of us. He's a fellow entrepreneur that is doing really cool things in the world of AI to actually support small business owners and entrepreneurs everywhere, all the way from the small business level to enterprise level clients. So many cool things that he's up to. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Chad Vavra. Chad is a designer, a developer, and a team leader with over 20 years of experience helping some of the biggest companies in the world bring products to market. His experience includes, here's a little bit of a teaser of just some of the projects and companies he's been involved with: Pixar, Google, Meta, Samsung, Lenovo, the US Air Force, and Cisco, and his own company and his own creation. I think it's so cool what he's built alongside his co-founder is called Chat Agency AI, which is a web platform that serves as a virtual consultant, providing entrepreneurs, small business owners, and even intrapreneurs with data-driven market analysis, automated business documentation, and dynamic pitch creation tools. It's not just another AI wrapper. And if you're not familiar with that term AI wrapper, Chad's going to really break that down for us, because instead it's his co-founders and his own 20 plus years of business experience democratized to everyone by AI. I'm very excited for all of us to learn from him today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Chad Vavra. All right, Chad, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Heck yes. You have such a cool background, Chad. I honestly mean what I said in the intro is that everywhere I looked, it seems like you've been a part of such big projects, which to me says that you're a big thinker, which we always love to learn from them. So take us beyond the bio. Who's Chad? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, sure. So as you kind of touched on, I've been in the business for 20 plus years. I got my start when I was still finishing up my degree in college with a company that was contracting with Pixar and Disney to make video games. And so I had the fortune to work with kind of the biggest, coolest company in the game at the time. And got to see the attention to detail and the process and and everything that went into that, and that really kind of like set the stage for me in terms of the way I kind of see projects and I see how they come together from a really system thinking kind of approach. From there, .com bubble in the early 2000s, I moved to New York City. I worked on a bunch of startups, and then as things progressed, I found my way from being a designer with a fine art degree into a self-taught programmer, and eventually leading UX teams, because that's kind of the amalgamation of creativity and technology is sort of user experience in the digital world. And so I started working for agencies, and that's what led me to working with so many really great clients like Samsung and the US Air Force and Meta and Google and others. And yeah, I got to work on some of like these really incredible projects. But my team and we would go in and we would get to really kind of help define what that product was going to be, the launch, the customer service side of it was really exciting, doing a lot of that service design. And then ultimately, I ended up at Cisco. And so I felt that it was time for me to kind of go to the client side. And I led user experience and content strategy for Cisco.com for about 4.5 years. During a major transformation, moving the site from an on-site hosting to a cloud hosting. It's when large language models and AI kind of came into the picture. And so I got to see a lot of that at Cisco, and I got to experience some of the wins and then some of the challenges and the speed bumps. And that ultimately led me to what is Chat Agency AI.
Yeah, I love that overview. Chad, I'm very excited to just talk directly about chat agency AI. But before we get there, I want it from your words, because me as someone from the outside looking in, I think it's really cool how much you embrace ideas and validation and how much data is a part of that. But introduce listeners to it if they haven't seen it just yet. What is chat agency AI?
Yeah, so it is a website. It's a web platform. It, as you noted, it uses AI to help you work through the early stages, the strategy, the validation, the building conviction around an entrepreneurial or new idea. And that new idea could be really anything. It could be a business, or a product within a business, or just a feature within a product. The way that it's set up is that it takes all of that experience that I have working with clients and my co-founder Jeff, and we've built that into the system so that you don't have to be a prompt engineer, right? You don't need to know how to create system prompts and tell the AI, okay, you're going to play this role and I need you to do these tasks and figure these things out. It really is set up so that you can just focus on your idea, and it will give you the resources that you need to have the conviction around that idea, so that you can then go and convince other people that it's a great idea. And where I'll kind of come back to, and you touched on this in the setup around AI wrappers, is that it's all about context. And so what chat agency AI does is it builds really, really deep expertise and context around your idea for you that you're not going to get from just general sort of surface level prompting that you do with say a chat GPT or Claude. What we've done is that we've combined all of the best AI into the system. So we're using anywhere between half a dozen and 10 different AI utilities on the back end, storing all of that information for you, and then putting that into the prompts that go into the process so that there is a lot of specificity in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because a lot of times, I love how much you're emphasizing prompts and the importance there. A lot of times, I mean, we always hear garbage in, garbage out, and if you don't prompt it the right way, you're not going to get the outputs. What really stands out to me is you frame so much of chat agency AI around an idea, is that we can take any idea and run it through. And I really like, and obviously you're a very talented designer, I really like the visuals that I can see of what comes out of it. It's your detailed idea, your market research, your value propositions, the problem statements, all these things that when we're kicking ideas around in our heads solo, that we don't have a sounding board to bounce them off of. We try to think about all of these things, but it just seems to me like the way that you guys have built this, it knows what's a valuable output. Give us an example of how streamlined that prompt, that idea can be that we put in, knowing that you guys have done the work on the back end to make sure those outputs are valuable.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can be, so there's two ways into creating an idea in chat agency. We just launched on the homepage a new feature where you can just put the idea into the text box that's right on the homepage, click submit. If you're not logged in, it'll log you in. If you are logged in, it'll just automatically create an output for you. And that's kind of the most streamlined way to do it. And it'll come back and it'll say, okay, here's sort of an overview, a summary. Here's the target markets that it would suggest that, you think about, give you some of like the key features that, it would suggest. And then you have the ability to go in and edit. Now, so that's one way. The other way is that if you log in and you land on your dashboard, you can either input an idea and then ask AI to enhance that idea. And so what it'll do is it will then take your idea and it will give it a lot of like that context and detail that we've built into the back end before you submit it. Or you can start with a problem. So you can say, well, I work in education and there's just a teacher shortage, right? We just don't have the teacher to student ratio that, we need, and we want to use technology to try to solve this. And it will come back and it will suggest three options to you, and then you can say which of these options is closest to what I'm thinking about and kind of move forward with that. And so it knows to build the foundation of your idea around a summary and then these markets and then these features, because from a system approach, those are the things that are going to influence things like the market research and the value proposition and et cetera and so forth. You'll even see that you can choose to, I'm going to run a value proposition just for a very specific segment based on that early first step. And I think that that's what's important here, is that my experience has been that new entrepreneurs or people that are kind of going through the process on their own, or even intrapreneurs that are kind of new to the work, they don't necessarily know all of the steps that go into a really, really solid, really complete strategy. And so this sort of, builds that for you. And if you skip a step that is necessary for the next step, it'll tell you. It'll say, no, you need to go back and do the value proposition before you can generate, some of these other things. We've kind of tried to obscure obfuscate, put behind the curtain some of that tricky stuff that you will struggle with if you're trying to do it on your own in just a Chat GPT or an OpenAI or things like that.
Yeah. Chad, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second here, because it's something that really stands out to me the more that I looked into you personally, not just your business, but everything that you've personally done leading up to Chat Agency AI, is that I would imagine a lot of people that you've worked with, it's easy for them to point at you and say, oh, Chad's an idea guy. And so that's why when I look at the onus of the work that you do and so many things, obviously your words are very intentional, ideas are so prevalent there, but here you are on the air having this conversation with me. And you talked about, well, even if you don't have an idea, even if you can state the problem, there's a teacher shortage. Our teacher to student ratio is out of whack, and that's something we'd like to work on. Why are ideas so central to the way that you phrase this and the way that you view this? Because I mean, I agree, obviously, as an outsider, that's what I leverage AI for, is it's objective. I can say, what am I missing? That's one question that I ask ChatGPT often. What am I missing here? But I just think it's so interesting looking at the body of your work as an ideas person, but then also as a systems thinker. You've said the word systems quite a few times today. Cross that bridge for us, because clearly in your mind, the two are totally intertwined.
Yeah. So the notion of an idea kind of came early on in the development of Chat Agency. And, I'm one of those people. I know a lot of people who carry a notebook, and that notebook is full of ideas, right? They're always kind of like, oh, the world would be better if I had this thing, or if this thing existed, or if this was different. And they'll put that idea in a notebook, but then nothing really happens with it. They don't know how to take the next step. They don't know, does it already exist? Is this possible? Are there competitors, et cetera, and so forth? And so I really structured Chat Agency around this notion that it's almost like you have this notebook of ideas, and your dashboard is almost like that digital notebook. It just is helping you take those ideas further, getting them to the next step, fine-tuning them to the point where they could, you could execute them. So that in a lot of ways, an idea is synonymous with a project. But I think that, you start with an idea. And so that's what I really wanted to kind of build around. Now, that notion around the systems thinking is, you're the first person that's really brought that up, and the connection of an idea to systems thinking. But what I would say is that it's almost impossible for anybody to be an expert in everything. And when I was doing my early interviews with users and customers, and talking to people that had gone from an idea to a startup to an incubation program to being listed on this stock market, what they told me was, they said, you always need like these co-founders, because you might be the idea guy, but you need a finance person and you need a tech person. Or you might be the tech person and you might be okay at finance, but you're not the strategy person that's going to go out there and, kind of like build that value proposition and stuff like that. And when I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the work that I've done with all these clients, I was like, yeah, that's really what we brought to the table. What I and my team that I'd always, put together from a UX perspective, we brought that expertise to apply all of that system thinking and all of those specific talents to their idea, to their problem. And so, I think that kind of, in a large way, is just what I was trying to do was democratize that, where, when we worked with some of these bigger companies and a bigger agency, we were charging hundreds of thousands of dollars, up to $1 million, to do this process. And what I saw with AI was that, it's going to change the way we work, and for an entrepreneur or for an enterprise level company, something like Chat Agency, that just gives you a jump start. That just saves you, in the feedback that we've gotten from some of our users, it saves you 3 months of upfront time. And so again, it's that idea of democratizing the elements of the system that you are actually, looking for help with, looking for a co-founder to help you with, into the product.
Yeah, it's cool hearing your perspective on that. I want to play this out a little bit more when it comes to the idea, because a phrase that we throw around quite frequently in marketing and in sales, and especially in entrepreneurship, is to validate our idea. And way too often when we say that, Chad, I get to talk to entrepreneurs for a living, and I see this so frequently that way too often when we say validate the idea, we are victims of confirmation bias, which is obviously a natural human psyche. And I would argue that the ChatGPTs of the world are actually they're making that problem even worse, because I could tell ChatGPT a pretty terrible idea today, Chad, and it will support me because ChatGPT is very nice to me, and I'm sure that's a common experience across the board. That's what stands out to me about your approach, especially in the screenshots that I've seen from behind the scenes, is that it will leverage real life data. It will turn to data over feelings, it seems. And I'd love for you to give us some more insights there. How do you balance that validation with sometimes the validation is maybe this isn't the best idea?
So it's true that, that and I've heard you talk to other entrepreneurs, right? That, when you go to your friends and family, they tend to want to be nice to you and tell you that's great, that's brilliant, the smartest thing I've ever heard. And AI is kind of the same way, because at the end of the day, the large language models are trained to answer your question. They're really not trained to not know the answer. And so they're always going to kind of come back and try to give you something. With ours, we worked really hard to make sure that hallucination wouldn't happen. And we do our absolute best to stop hallucination by using real world data, like to do live internet searches and to make sure that the system is always sourcing itself appropriately and doing those things. The other thing is that, we touched on earlier, the system prompts, is that, we say in the system prompts, to tell me what the challenges are going to be. Tell me where I'm going to struggle with this idea. Tell me what's going to be really hard. But nowhere in it, and this is the something that I guess, you should know, is that nowhere in it do we ever say, don't, we don't ever say, just, tell me to stop. We're always trying to help you build conviction, but it kind of comes in sort of surprising ways. So an example of that is, my co-founder was running an idea the other day, and he had said, this is kind of a new market, and it's a new offering, and we've never seen it before. It just isn't here, and he lives in Hawaii, but he also spends a lot of time on the East Coast, so he's pretty worldly in terms of the United States, or pretty traveled in terms of the United States, I should say. But when he was using the platform, it came back and it said, hey, check out this YouTube video from China. It's in Chinese, but it's really close to what you're doing. And for him, he was like, some people might look at that and say, oh, it's been done before, this is no good. But what he saw was validation. He saw that, hey, there were these handful of things that I needed to know if they were going to work or not. And this video that I saw, it proved to me that they're going to work, and it validates my idea. And the fact that it's just not in the US market yet, it's not here yet, is super exciting to him. And so I think it's also a little bit of perspective. You want to be critical in some ways, but you also want to be optimistic in that criticism.
Chad, I love that. It's funny. Before we hit record together today, I knew at some point, I'm a sucker for quotes, and I knew at some point today I wanted to interject your favorite quote that you had shared with me before we got together today. I'll read it out loud for listeners. It says, critical thinking without hope is cynicism. Hope without critical thinking is naivete. It seems like that plays into not only the way that you think, Chad, but I feel like we're starting to see a teaser into the fact that it actually plays into the way that you develop products, the way that you've developed this product and this business. Talk to us about why that quote is so impactful on you.
Yeah. So that's Maria Popova. She has a really great newsletter called the I can't even say it. Marginarian. Used to be called Brain Tease, I think. But anyway, that quote is really important to me because my experience in the agency world was one where there was a tendency to always kind of say we're the best at this, and just pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, we really nailed it. We really rocked that. And I think that, there's, and this gets into some of my personal bias, but there's an awards culture that surrounds, marketing. And in that awards culture, there's a lot of, building these things up to be the greatest thing that's ever been done in the history of the world. And for me, I always looked at them and said, well, no, that could be better. If you kind of think of it and you say, is that really solving the problem for the user? It probably could solve the problem for the user better, right? And if you iterated and if there was a new version and all those things, and what I found in myself was that people started to think I was a bit of a cynic, and I had to really sort of kind of change the way that I approached that feedback. And that quote really helped me because it was that any of the critique that I was providing or any of the critique that I saw in these products was out of hope, out of optimism for a better product, for a better outcome. And so again, it's in my product, I try to, I want people to be really hopeful about their ideas, and I want them to be excited and build conviction about their ideas, because I think that every idea deserves a chance. But at the same time, I also want them to, have that level of critique to make that idea as good as it possibly can be.
Ooh, I love the way you phrase that, Chad. I believe that every idea should have the room to succeed. It should have a chance. And I think that the conviction that you talk about, it's come up a few times in today's conversation. And I'm so appreciative of that, because 18 years into my entrepreneurial journey, I call it delusion at the beginning. I think that we need a healthy level of delusion to believe that our ideas are going to succeed. And I think that products like yours actually back that up, so that it's not just delusional. There's actually some critical thought in there, as well as that hope and that optimism with some market research to help us support that, so that we do believe it, because it does require that in order for that idea to even have a chance. So Chad, with all of that said, what I'm really excited, I love doing this in these conversations, is switching gears and putting the spotlight on you personally, because obviously you had so much experience in the agency world. Being an entrepreneur is very different from operating within the agency world. However, you do get to pick and choose those things from the agency world that you liked, inject it into your business. Things you didn't like, you can change them obviously now. Talk to us about some of those experiences as you've transitioned into the entrepreneur that you are today. What are some of the things that you've borrowed from agency world, and what are some of the things that you like doing differently?
Wow. That's such a great question, and one that I've not spent a lot of time reflecting on. So I appreciate it, and I'll do my best. One of the things in the agency world that I really loved was the collaboration, between a client and the team. And when approached in really fun and healthy ways, there was just this, almost, there was a fun atmosphere that was really exciting. And so, that's something that I try to bring to, my business, to my entrepreneurial journey as best I can. Now, I think that everybody who has gone through or is starting an entrepreneurial journey knows that there can be a loneliness factor to it. And I, because you typically you kind of start out on your own and you slowly build. And I've looked to, Reddit communities, and I've tried to, be active on LinkedIn and things like that to kind of, to sort of maintain some of that, camaraderie. I've also, really, fallen back on those relationships that I've built. And I think that this is another important thing, is that a lot of times when you leave a team or when you leave a job, you lose touch with a lot of the people at that job. You lose touch with a lot of the relationships you've built there. And I've actively worked to not do that. And the truth is like my co-founder and co-owner in Chat Agency is my former boss. He started the agency that I worked for, and has since then exited the agency, and he is now he now works with me on Chat Agency AI, and that's really, really exciting for me. And it's also just in a way it just it helps me validate my journey, knowing that somebody from my past like that trusts me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chad.
Some of what I've left behind, to your point, right? And I talked about it before, like the awards culture. There was a lot of that. Some of the things that I didn't like about the agency life was, agencies are, you kind of always, responding to a request for proposal or request for project, RFP. And it was always very frustrating to me, the amount of money that would go into a pitch, and then that could pay off in a project, or it could just be like, I'm sorry, we're going to go another way. And that I was always kind of dismayed when we really, really like spent a ton of money and did a lot of bells and whistles, and then there just really wasn't the response that we were hoping for. And so I think that one of the beauties of doing it yourself and being an entrepreneur and building your own business is you don't have to do that so much. I mean, you do have to go out and pitch clients and do things like that, but you don't have to go to the extent that we did at the big agency level. Excuse me.
Yeah, so well said. Seth Godin calls it the tyranny of being picked, and that's one thing that you alluded to. We will always succumb to that, partly when we're looking for customers and clients for our own businesses, but there is a strong degree that I feel like in entrepreneurship, we get to choose us. You talk about those RFPs, and entrepreneurship is cool because we equally get to choose the people that we work with, just like they get to choose us. And I love that freedom, that avoidance to an extent of the tyranny of being picked that Seth Godin talks about. So Chad, I love how much you're embracing that side of entrepreneurship and how it's made its way into our conversation today. I also love asking this question at the end of every interview because it's super broad, and I love getting inside of incredible guests' minds like yours because you all see the world so differently and you bring such a different set of experiences. And that question is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you're one of us, Chad, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in part like, going back to my favorite quote, right, is, you maintain that level of hope and optimism. And in that, apply that to yourself. Because I think that, for me, I spent a lot of time feeling like I didn't want, or I wasn't the person who was right to run their own business. And so, I started my own business later in my career. But I would tell people is, don't be afraid, don't be down on yourself, apply that optimism and hope to yourself, and give it a shot. At the end of the day, you can always go back to work for somebody else. That's always going to be there. That option is always there. So, definitely, take the leap and do it in an optimistic fashion.
Yeah, it ties in so well with our actual conversation, Chad, as well. It goes back to that quote that I wanted to call out for listeners, which is, give it a chance to succeed. Every idea deserves the chance to succeed. And I love the fact that that's weaved in so tightly in that piece of advice that you're leaving our audience with. And so I'm very excited for listeners to lean on Chat Agency to help them give those ideas a chance to succeed. You called it out earlier in our conversation, but I really want to emphasize it for listeners now that we're about to drop your link, is that at the top of your website, when someone lands on your website, the text box is right there for someone to type into and hit submit. So listeners, if you've really enjoyed learning from Chad and hearing from Chad here today, and you think to yourself, I want to see what this looks like to get everything that I need to consider with regards to my idea. I want to get inspired. I want to build that conviction. I want to validate my business, my product, or the features that I'm thinking about. That chat box is waiting for you. Chad, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, so the website is chatagency.ai. Everybody gets one free idea in the platform. So you can run one idea through the platform completely free. And then after that, there is a monthly subscription kind of model that we have. You can share your ideas with friends, and they can come in and see it if you give them access. We also have an option so that you can join as a team. So if you're at a company or you have a group of people that you want to all share the same dashboard and share the same notebook of ideas, you can do that too.
Yes, and listeners, in a world where everyone's looking for that competitive advantage with regards to all these AI tools popping up, there's no excuse, literally, to not try out Chat Agency AI. You heard so much from Chad today about how it works, why it works. Even when you go on the website, I mean, what really struck me in our pre-production team is the detailed outputs that you're going to get. You're really going to take an idea that a lot of times is fuzzy for a lot of us in all the different ideas that we have as entrepreneurs, and you're really going to get to validate it and build that conviction. So you already know the drill, listeners. We are making it as easy as possible to find that link, especially if you're on the go. It's down below in the show notes. You'll find chatagency.ai. You can click right on through from there. Otherwise, Chad, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Brian, thank you. It was great.